every week, Georgie does a little feature called The Half, where she meets somebody rather fascinating that's involved in the arts or creative in some way, shape or form. And I'm really excited because tonight an author joins me to chat, A.L.Tayler. Anna Louise is an author of The Adventures of Smokey and Friends, children's books inspired by animals from her own childhood that have become an inspiration to many other young children. Thank you so much, Anna, for coming in.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
So let's not mess around. First off, tell us about the books.
Oh, well, the books were actually created and they were inspired by Smokey, who wore yellow sunglasses. And basically, we all lived, my family and I, we all lived up at Purdis for 30 years. And he was renowned for wearing these glasses and popping over to the Ipswich Golf Club when my father was playing golf. And we had all the wildlife and the other animals that were there.
Yeah.
And he was wonderful with people and animals in general. And we had so many adventures with him that in the end everybody said, well, I think you really need to do something with this horse and write some stories. So basically that is exactly what happened.
So we talk about Smokey popping his sunglasses on. He didn't put his own sunglasses on, did he? So what made you, why did you think big yellow sunglasses, horse, let's do it?
I think, well, if I tell you how they came about,
yeah,
I think
sure.
that's probably the best way. My father, in fact, years ago, he was working in London. He's retired now. He's 92. And when he was there, I think he went to a party in London, and I think this is where the glasses came from. And on one particular day, it was very, very hot where we were living. And we sort of noticed, despite, Smokey had his fly net on his head, and he was sort of moving his head around and looking at everybody else with their glasses on, and we sort of looked at each other, my family, we thought, well, maybe we should put these glasses on him. And of course, we put them on. And once we did that, we couldn't get them off him.
Oh.
And really, that's how they came about. And everybody loved him. And even when you took him off his harness, he'd walk around the garden and this, that, and the other. And he became such a character that really he was the inspiration behind the books. And other animals loved him. Sadly, we lost him in 2005. But really, he was the inspiration behind the books. Without him, they would never have been created. So,
and you had other animals, didn't you, when you were growing up? And do they also feature? Did they make the cut?
They make the cut.
Good.
They certainly do make the cut. We have Baloo in the stories. He was a Hungarian Vizsla, and then we have Portia, who was a white Persian cat. In fact, Portia and Smokey were great friends. Portia was more like a little dog. First thing in the morning, I mean, she made it quite clear if Smokey hadn't had his breakfast, she'd come through her cat flap and my father would come downstairs and you'd suddenly hear this meow. In other words, saying, get your skates on, Dad, come on, It's time to feed him. So she was there first, and then sort of Baloo came in. He was a very small puppy, and he sort of looked at Smokey when he first got to know him and thought, God, you're rather big, aren't you? Are we really going to be friends? And in the end, he sort of looked at Portia, and Portia sort of looked at Baloo, and I think she sort of looked at him as if to say, gosh, are we all going to be friends? Oh. And that's really how it came about.
And they were obviously such a huge influence on you and your sister kind of growing up. And so is that why you wanted to write it down?
Yes, they were stories that I wanted to create, and I wanted to share them with young children because I know that, the animals were so gifted and so talented, and and particularly Smokey, because there's a story that I have told for many years about a little boy in London, and when I was training. And I was actually working with a lady by the name of Dorota Shadensky in the dyslexic field, and I was dyslexic myself. And this little boy, he refused to wear his glasses. And I was called into the classroom because I was actually working at this school at the time. And the teacher said to me, well, we're trying to get this little boy to wear his glasses, and we just don't know what to do. Well, at the time, Smokey was, as I said, I was working in London, and I went home by train, and I took a picture of Smokey and a video and this, that and the other, and a recording. And I took it back to school the following week. And this little boy was very definite and was saying, no, I'm not going to wear my glasses. I'm not going to wear them. But after he'd seen Smokey, that was it. It was, well, if Smokey can wear glasses, then so can I.
Yeah.
And that's really, why I decided to have Smokey in the books, because he was so inspirational, not by wearing his glasses, but his kindness, his thoughtfulness. He just inspired children in general. And he was always, even with my sister as a child, he'd always come into the kitchen for breakfast.
Into the kitchen.
Into the kitchen. Into the kitchen. Literally, he would open the gate, his paddock gate. And, well, if we didn't, he'd kick it as if to say, well, what are you doing? Why haven't you opened it? Come on, it's breakfast time. And, yeah, he'd kick the door open and he'd trot into the kitchen, and my sister would be, getting her school books together or reading the newspaper or whatever it was. And he'd just come in. He'd have his own cup and saucer with his tea. And all of a sudden you'd hear this. And once he'd had his breakfast and his fruit, he'd trot out and Helen would go to school. In fact, actually, sometimes he'd even follow her to the car door. He was like
I can
that.
see why he's been such a big influence on you, and why you wanted to put pen to paper. Were you a writer before, or was kind of Smokey and his friends, was that the debut, your first kind of book, or had you always wanted to write something?
Well, I would say that writing came in sort of later life, really, because I'd lived abroad, and I think that when I came back, that's when I really developed the characters and the stories and the ideas, and and I had also done a lot of photography, and travelling, and so therefore I wanted to incorporate all that in the stories, and that's exactly what I did. And they have been received very well. There's a website that goes with it, and I have to say to everybody, it is being updated at the moment. So I've had many people asking me, it is being updated. So I do know all about it, and this. So, that's basically what I decided to do, and wherever I go, people always ask me about the animals. And you can go on to the Adventures of Smokey and Friends YouTube channel, where you can meet all the animals there.
Fantastic.
And there are new animals coming in, and there is a new story as well.
Brilliant. Good stuff. We're going to hear more because you were diagnosed as dyslexic was it a while ago now? Or?
I was diagnosed when I was 26.
Okay. Yeah. So, that seems quite late to be diagnosed, but we'll talk more and we'll find out about the impact that had on your writing. BBC local radio live across Suffolk and Norfolk this evening with you through until 8 o'clock. I'm Sarah Lilley in for Georgie Jameson tonight, and my guest for the half this week is author A.L.Tayler, who has written some beautiful children's books inspired by her own childhood animals, and it's been a really lovely story. But one thing that makes your story even more interesting is that you're dyslexic.
I am, yes.
But it wasn't hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Yeah. But you weren't diagnosed until a bit later on.
I was diagnosed when I was 26 by Dr. McLaughlin and in Tavistock Place in London. And I suppose really it was because of my schooling was sort of in the 70s and the 80s. So although people knew about it, they didn't. They did and they didn't. So it was very confusing, I suppose, for children and teachers who didn't really know what they were dealing with. And because I am dyslexic, I tend to perceive, see, hear and think very differently. But the most interesting thing that's really come about being dyslexic is that #dyslexic thinking has now become a skill, which I'm actually thrilled about, really, because that has... Being dyslexic, you do tend to think very differently.
Right.
And you process the information differently, which, it's, for instance, if you read something, yourself, you might read it completely differently to me, and you'd say to me, well, Anna, how come you're reading it like that? And that's how dyslexic people are. I mean, for some people, the words are jumping off the page, and it can be very, very difficult, or the words are back to front, there's all different forms of it. But no, I wasn't diagnosed until I was 26, and it was very, very difficult.
How did it feel to get diagnosed?
I think when I first found out, I broke down in tears. I think it was a relief, but also I was probably sad that it had been found out at a later stage. But then it was the time, it was that era, and so. But it was. I'm glad I have been diagnosed. But yeah.
So what I don't know if it's impact, influence. What does that have? Dyslexia have on your writing, do you think?
I don't think I would never have written the books, and you wouldn't see the creativity in them had I not been dyslexic. The creativity has actually made the stories, because you have all the images, you have the pictures, the illustrations, the travels, everything, and that is what has made my books. It's the way I have processed everything, and it's the way I've actually mapped them into the books. And had I not had that disability, you wouldn't see them today. They wouldn't be out there.
Do you see it as a disability?
On occasions, I can get very frustrated, but I think anybody who's got dyslexia gets very frustrated with it. And some people deal with it better than others. There are days when I'm writing and I can be pretty fluent, but then there are other days where I am not fluent at all, and I'm sitting on the computer thinking and scratching my head, thinking, what am I going to say, and I'll just sort of disappear away from the computer for a couple of hours, and then I'll come back. You have good days and you have writer's block like any other, but no, I get there in the end. And
so tell us about, because the other thing that's influenced you and your writing is travelling, and also your creativity, because tell us about the photography.
Well, I think, as I said, I was very lucky, and I lived in America for many years. And whilst I was there, I travelled, and I was able to do a lot of photography. I lived very closely to Niagara Falls, which was absolutely wonderful, and I miss it to this day. Good old Niagara Falls. And being able to live in such a beautiful vicinity, an area in New York State, I think it was where it really developed. And because of the photography, I was very lucky, and had my work. I actually put it into the Albright Knox Collectors Art Gallery at that time. I don't know whether they still do the Collectors Gallery exhibitions or anything like that. But no, my work was there. And so really that's how it all came about.
Where does the creativity come from? Were you like, as a child, were you like that? Is it your parents' influence?
I think probably from my mother. My mother was a international children's knitwear designer.
Wow.
And she designed for various celebrities and royalty and people like that. And she did it for many years, and she's now retired. Yeah. And living in Woodbridge, but she's always been very creative. I think my father was probably more on the sports side.
Right.
But I think probably it probably came through her,
So how can people tell us a bit about the book? So we've got Smokey and the Mystery of, is this Rabbitinia, yeah. Smokey and the Disappearing Fish, and The Secret of Christmas Magic. I'm a sucker for anything Christmas related, so they are fantastic.
I think we all are.
Yeah. So where can people get them?
You can actually buy them on my website, and I do go to various shows around East Anglia, so you can actually buy them from there. Also on my Facebook pages, under The Adventures of Smokey and Friends, or you can look me up on Google under www.smokeyandfriends.co.uk, and you can order them from there.
Fantastic. And what was your family's reaction when they saw the book? Because obviously The animals that feature, those animals will have meant an awful lot to them as well.
Oh, they were thrilled. You know, they've been they've been very positive about the books. It was, as I said, it's been a project that I had wanted to do. And I suppose I wanted to inspire other dyslexics as well. You know, if I could do it, you know, it was me proving and showing, well, look, if I can do it, then you can do it too. And inspiring children too.
Yeah.
You know, so that's no, my family have been absolutely wonderful over them. They really have.
And what does the future hold?
Well, the future holds a new book. There is a new book that I have written, and I will explain why it has been delayed, because a lot of people have asked me about it and where is it? The reason is I have had COVID 3 times.
Oh,
So,
3 times?
3 times I've had COVID-19. I had it in 2020, and then I had it at Christmas 21, and then I had it sort of round about April, May time this year.
Yeah.
So, you know, every time I've tried to write, or, you know, I've just had to put it to one side, or other projects that I've been doing, and that is why. So, no, there is another book, and The Adventures of Smokey and Friends is you know, it's not going to be, I'm not giving up on it, and the website is being maintained at the moment, and a lot of maintenance is being done on that. So that's basically what's going on. I'd love to have some animation. There's lots of different things that you know that I'd like to do with it. Of course, not just writing.
Yeah,
you know, clothing.
Well, we shall wait and see. Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming in tonight to chat. Just remind us of the website address.
The website is https / smokeyandfriends.co.uk.
Brilliant.
And if you go into Google, you can go The Adventures of Smokey and Friends, and it should come up there.
And it's quite easy to spot a horse in big yellow sunglasses. I love your T-shirt, by the way,
you're
which
very
actually
welcome. Well, I had to put
features
it on.
Smokey.
I couldn't resist that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Anna, thank you so much. It's been lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Author A.L. Tayler joining me for The Half.